welcome, Matt, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Guy. It's a pleasure. It's an honour to be here, actually.
No, it's really.
And,
I'm really looking forward to it.
Brilliant, especially all the people you've had before. It's it's great.
No, it is. It's been, to be honest, for me, it's been such a learning curve, and it's been like so eye-opening. Like the
Yeah.
stuff that people have told me, and I feel honoured to speak to the people I've spoken to, including yourself. So thank you.
Fantastic. And I think what's really interesting about this is that to hear these podcasts and hear those stories, there's no platform to hear them sometimes. So I think something like this is, really positive.
Yeah, I think that's partly like the inspiration behind it as well, was that there's so much knowledge out there and there's so much need of education.
Yeah.
And this it's a very easy way to share that education and those stories that are there forever then, and future generations can pick up and learn from it, even if it's like a history book.
Absolutely. A history book of podcasts.
Yeah, it would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So firstly, Matt, can you kick off just telling us like how you started really your career, like how your education influenced that and how you got into what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I can start talking about my kind of school years to further education. So when I was at school, I always wanted to do something creative.
Yeah.
And I was very lucky to have the opportunity to go and study a creative subject. I think sometimes you have to think that creativity is it's definitely a privilege to study something creative.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very fortunate I had the opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a fear with people that if you're grafting at school, you must go and get a sort of a job which perhaps has a more of a, I don't know, like more of a financial incentive. Mm-hmm. But to make a success out of something creative, I think people are quite hesitant. Mm-hmm. So to be able to do something and to have worked in it for the last 13, 14 years, I count myself very lucky.
Yeah.
So whilst at school, I was pretty creative. So I loved photography, did graphic design. I didn't actually do art. I'm definitely not the best artist in the world, but and that kind of paired with my psychology and business sort of studies, I thought that they were kind of a good foundation in terms of what I do today as an interior designer.
Yeah.
But the key thing is that whilst at school, I think it's okay to have no clue what you want to do. I had no idea. Mm-hmm. So even having done my GCSEs, done my A-levels, mm-hmm. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And so, there were sort of many cards on the table, and I went down the road of doing interior design. Mm-hmm. But actually, my foundation was architecture at university, but I then sort of like transitioned to do a degree in interior design. Mm-hmm. And yeah, again, I was fortunate that I kind of made that choice because I kind of stuck at it, and I love it as a career, and the people I've met, the projects I've done. But yeah, from school, transitioned. I was lucky I did some travelling as well to do a degree in interior design with the University of Kent, and graduated in 2010, and it's 14 years ago. It makes me sound old. Yeah.
I'm literally scared. I have that problem.
Yeah. And whenever I think about my career, I actually think that the first kind of post degree, sort of 2010 to about 2013, for a good 3 years, I was really trying to find my feet. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay. You just have to be really resilient, because actually there's so many opportunities to kind of drift off and go elsewhere, because at the time they're probably paying a good salary or something. Mm-hmm. But I think if you follow your heart, you follow your passion, and if you keep knocking at those doors, you will eventually get those opportunities which will lead you to the next chapter to grow as an individual in your experience.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I did anything from set design to restaurant design to doing planning applications to working in a bar to working in a pub down the road. Like, you just have to graft and graft and graft. And then sort of I'd say 2013 was when I got my first sort of I suppose it's kind of London launch pad kind of career to what I've been doing now,
Mm-hmm.
and that was in the company in Putney,
Okay.
and I was doing. So they were called Superior Interiors actually, and yeah, predominantly doing workplace design. But for me, it was great because it was like a big push and very much was thrown to the deep end and kind of go from there.
But like you've actually touched on it, but it's actually really difficult for students or someone exploring like what to do with their career. There's this whole kind of feeling that you should know what you want to do, and you should have like this passion that you're fulfilling your dreams and everything. And I get that, but it actually can be really hard and just overwhelming for
Absolutely,
people coming
yeah.
into the workplace or having the confidence to pursue a creative career. Like, what's your message to those people?
Well, funnily enough, I did a talk to a sixth form, probably my toughest crowd yet.
Okay.
70 sixth formers, and that was up in Yorkshire a couple of weeks ago,
Mm-hmm.
and had the opportunity to speak at a careers fair, and I guess my messaging in that respect was, if you want to do something creative, find opportunities to, whether it's online platforms, anyone you know. I'm not trying to advocate nepotism because I definitely didn't come from nepotism, but I think that there's kind of like apprenticeships, there's work experience kind of platforms, there's career fairs. Like, go and do your research and try and have that opportunity, to try and make that opportunity. I think the key thing is for me as well, as an interior designer, and now as an owner of ORCA,
Mm-hmm.
a degree is definitely not the be all and end all
Mm-hmm.
of me potentially, well, looking at getting candidates. I think if you have the right attitude and the right application and you can use great programs, then you're already there.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
for me, and what's really fundamental is kind of is work experience.
Mm-hmm.
So learning kind of in a commercial sense is really important.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to the idea of somebody at school not necessarily knowing what they want to do and being creative, yeah, I'm a strong believer if you're passionate about something and you're tenacious enough, just follow your heart and you'll make success out of it. Definitely.
Yeah. If there's a passion behind something, it's
Yeah, definitely.
not just chasing money, but actually to make a difference to the world.
Yeah,
You will.
yeah. After all, like we all only get one shot here, don't we?
Yeah.
So it's making that legacy, and it's not. Kind of sounds cliche, but it's not. It's not having any regrets.
Yeah.
I know so many people who are perhaps in a more kind of somewhat kind of professional career,
Mm-hmm.
and their outlet is creativity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's quite interesting sometimes. Or they think, oh, I wish I did this, I wish I did that. So I think to have the opportunity of worked in interior design and sort of the world of architecture for the last few years, I count myself very lucky.
And you've obviously been in workspace for like quite a transformative period of
Yeah,
workspace.
definitely.
How's it changed?
It's changed dramatically, and I know that a few people have on the podcast have spoken about COVID, but even without COVID, it's changed hugely. I think that from the initial kind of those, you look at 10, 12 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
it was a completely different landscape.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted slides in their office. Everyone was trying to be the next Google. But there was a big transition. I don't know whether anyone's spoken about this yet, but I do think that WeWork have had a huge influence on what everyone does and what everyone perceives as a workplace. And I think people can definitely have their opinions about them, especially the founder.
Yeah. Especially recently.
Especially recently, yeah. I mean, the irony is quite interesting there, but they 100% have shaped you know, the sort of foundation of what perhaps a co-working space is, what it looks like, what it can be, what it encompasses. And I think that's really kind of like spawned some beautiful businesses, ideas, kind of ideologies as to what there is in the world now.
Yeah, I agree. I can remember when a PO box or a co-working space was deemed as like you couldn't afford something proper. It was like quite
Yeah,
a negative connotation.
yeah,
Whereas now it's very trendy, it's very like community vibe, it's got lots of facilities, and I think it's about bringing like the comforts of residential and the experiential side of like hospitality and bringing those together into the workplace and really creating that culture.
definitely.
And now and they've like shown how it can be done, and now people are like following and being inspired,
Yeah, exactly.
which is great. So
Yeah.
then you've gone and set up Orca. How did you come to the name Orca, by the way?
Uh,
Can you say
it's a
that?
very good question, and I've been asked a few times. I'm trying to come up with the right answer, but I guess, um, kind of growing up, I was always into nature and animals,
Yeah,
and I like the simplicity of the word.
yeah,
It's four letters. It looks smart. It's kind of looks straight on the page.
yeah.
And a very good friend of mine helped develop the logo actually. So there were many iterations of it. I had so many names, but I like the simplicity of Orca, and it's definitely when I think of the name and I think of the business, it's definitely a bit of me. So yeah,
Oh, that's nice. I do
yeah,
feel like it's got a bit, it's got a ring to it. But it's memorable, but it's different, if you know what I
yeah,
mean. So
yeah,
it's nice. No, I do. I
yeah,
like it. So then you've obviously set up Orca and you've had experience further than just workspace.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
What
So
other sectors are you?
well, I suppose if I talk about kind of pre-Orca, maybe in the last 10 years, what I've done. So in
Yeah.
terms of the journey, maybe
Hmm.
if I talk
Yeah.
about that. So yeah, I was at Superior Interiors. I had a fantastic opportunity and very much, you know, a very small business, and it grew. And I left and I went to a company called Blue, who were a big kind of big
Oh, yeah.
hitter in the London market.
Hmm.
Then from them, I was working with them, and then the company itself merged with Tetris. But the transition from working in a very small boutique sort of company in Putney to going to working for a big design and build company in the West End was a huge transition, and that's something for about 8 years ago I was really longing for. I wanted to have that experience of actually what's it like in a larger organisation. How
Hmm.
do people work? Where does your responsibility lie? You know, are you still taking as much autonomy as you were for your projects? And of course you are. It's just managed differently.
Hmm.
And the exposure to larger projects was something I really kind of longed for.
Hmm.
Um, my journey from there to my next project was sorry, my next company I worked for was a very different. It's kind of a bit of a segue in my career. So I joined a company called TechSpace, who are a co-working operative. Have you heard of them?
Yeah, we have worked with them.
But
Yeah.
yeah, you've worked brilliant. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I
Yeah.
brought you into the projects. I don't know.
It-
And that was really interesting because I got to see how I was very much in house for a co-working business. So I kind of saw the kind of the drives, the KPIs of what a business sort of within that sector needs. Um, and for me, being an in-house designer, it was just a really interesting experience. And actually, I did a big project there. I did a big project in Berlin, so I was in Berlin pretty much every couple of weeks. So the opportunity to travel was really, that's one thing that kind of gave me a lot of desire to work there.
Mhm.
Um, and it's fantastic. Yeah, we converted a former warehouse into a sort of large co-working space.
Mhm.
And since then, they've opened a few other ones.
Yeah,
I'm still keep in touch with a few people that I worked with. So yeah,
that's nice.
yeah,
And being
definitely.
client side rather than like design and build side, got a different angle.
yeah, it couldn't be any more different, to be honest. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think, but again, to have that experience was really important for me.
Yeah.
The agency side of design and build is brilliant,
Yeah.
but I think having been client side, it gives you new perspective. You know, essentially what you're doing, what I did within that role, is you're building kind of like a Bible of design that can be deployed and implemented into new buildings. Because ultimately, if you work in house, you're trying to create like a bit of a blueprint where, if TechSpace, for example, at the time was to open new offices, there's that continuity between all the spaces, which lots of sort of serviced offices and co-working spaces are doing now.
Yeah, so that must have, when you moved back into agency side, like design and build, that must have shaped how you saw projects.
Yeah.
And what was so different? How did you think differently after that?
Oh, it's a really good question. I think so. I left TechSpace and I joined Thirdway and
Yeah,
had a lovely experience at Thirdway. Growing up, especially in the last few years, they were a company I really wanted to work for. So having the opportunity to work there was really good. But the shift back into agency is a bit of a wake up call actually, because I think sometimes when you're working in house, there's the nature that you're designing kind of. I'm not saying you're designing the same thing, but you're designing a bit of a kind of, as I said, a blueprint before, and you're putting it elsewhere. So you're making like tweaks and changes here and there. But then going to an agency side, design and build company like Thirdway, you know, you'll have 10 projects on the table and everyone is completely different. Every single one's completely different. So it's again a brilliant transition to doing that. Again, working for like a big design and build company, an award-winning design and build company within London. And I was there for 4.5 years, and then sort of last year I set up ORCA. So I suppose it's been kind of like full circle from very much starting at initial boutique size
yes.
to now, and having worked with big companies in the middle. So
Yeah,
the journey's been quite really, it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, it's been really like really broad, which I think
Yeah.
adds like a massive like level of interest into your perspectives and how you see projects. And like when you're talking about being at tech space and you're almost like managing sort of brand guidelines or a look and feel across multiple spaces, like kind of a consistency, to then having 10 projects and everyone being completely different,
Yeah.
and the challenge behind that, and then also the whole dynamic from being a startup. Yeah, wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you're ORCA
Yeah.
as of today, or a year ago,
Yeah.
and you don't just work with Workspace. You go
No.
further than that.
So yeah, very much so. And actually that's one of the beauties about having founded it. I've had the opportunity to work in a few sectors. I've worked at the moment doing a couple of retail projects. I'm currently working on a high-end residential project, and then done a bit of hospitality. And don't get me wrong, I'm still doing another workplace, but having the ability to open up a few more doors has been really interesting for me.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to spread myself too thin, because I think there's a danger in that. But just having the ability to transition to other fields has been really important for me.
The exposure.
Yeah, and I think at the moment it's almost back to, not so much back to square one, but I'm treating every day as a school day so far. I think that to try your hand at something and see how you get on with it is really important for kind of growth, for me to see how I want to shape the business and direct it. But the opportunity to work outside the workplace definitely has been really interesting, really, really important for me.
What have you picked up being in touch with other sectors that we should be applying to workplace?
That's a very good question. I think that we discussed earlier about workplace design definitely changing, definitely evolving.
Yeah.
An idea of bringing that kind of hospitality side that, people are saying resi-mercial and all these kind of like expressions you can say. But I suppose an element with workplace is you want to make it a desirable space to go to. But the people working for that company, it's whether it's 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week, 1 day a month, is mandatory to go there. So for their job, they have to go there. With retail and hospitality, what's interesting is a choice. So to kind of, there's an element where you have to very much, draw the people in like you do in workplace. But for me, the learnings I've had is that it's very much building that kind of narrative in terms of wanting people to be associated with that space. So whether it's like a members club or a sports club, a bar, whatever it is, it's giving that people that identity to be associated with it. And what's interesting about that side is that the use of it, especially with retail hospitality, is very much individuals going there in their free time. So they're going there out of choice, whether it's to socialise, to do exercise, to go to the cinema, to do activities that are outside of work. It's all about choice for them. So I think they're choosing to go somewhere. You've got to make it a nice environment which suits what the environment is offering.
Mm.
Yeah.
And generally they're paying to go there, but they're not paying to go to work. So
Yeah.
you're actually creating this environment or experience. And if you can just get a percentage of that and bring it to the workplace to attract and create that kind of memories, really.
Yeah.
Kind of why people go out, isn't it? It's like
Definitely. Yeah.
creating memories and
Everything's about memories and little moments and yeah.
So if I was a designer coming in, and a lot of people are inspired by founders and what they've set up and everything like that, what would your message be to someone looking to set up a studio like yourself? Like what learnings have you got?
Well, it's still very new to me. As I said before, every day's a school day, and it's okay. It's okay. Like, it will happen. I'm learning all the time.
Yeah.
The key things I would say is when I speak to other individuals within the business, individuals with outside the business, the amount of people that said to me, "Oh, I wish I did it. I wish I tried that. I wish I gave it a go." I think if there's a spark, then go for it. I think you can only try and fail, right? So if you have the opportunity to give it a go, I'd really highly recommend it. And also, a huge thing for me is be patient. We live in a world now where everything's click of a finger, and your Amazon delivery is there, your Gorilla order is there, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But not so much that. I think with technology and our phones and devices, people expect things to be happening straight away. Mm-hmm. But a business is built on not only skills and application, but relationships. And relationships can take a long time to build, and trust can take a long time to build. So I think having those foundations is really important. So basically, it's doing the best job you can, building relationship and trust, and building a business as yourself. Like for me, I'm representing the business, and it's very much important to kind of, I suppose, somewhat express those values when I'm dealing with clients, contractors, whatever it may be in the sort of business roadmap. It's really important. Work with good people, be kind to people, and just go for it. But one thing I would say, actually, from a design's perspective, for me, it's been really important to have an experience. So go out and get experience if you can.
Yes,
I think it's really, really important.
Because when the process is taking a while to pull through, as we've said, like it could take time. You've already mentioned rightly so. You can trust the process because you've already proved it.
Yeah.
You've already got an idea.
Trust the process. Exactly. Yeah.
And any mistakes you've made that you wouldn't want anyone to make?
It's a very good question. I think I suppose mindset's a big thing. So for me, when I was younger in my experience, I think my goals were to like work on the biggest project with the biggest value, for example. And I thought that was my answer, is that was kind of my indicator as a successful project. But actually, the reality is, especially having worked in different sectors now, you can work on a smaller project with a smaller budget, with a quick time frame, and it can be a scrappy project, but you'll have the best outcome because you've made it work. You've worked really hard. You've thought carefully about design, about implementing products, and actually you can get so much satisfaction from a small project compared to a big project. I think value and size is always relative to the project and the time it takes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's such a lovely message, Matt, because it's a bit like sort of ego lifting in the gym, isn't it? It doesn't necessarily get you anywhere. In fact, it can damage you.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
There's no point. Like, you just need to do what's best for you and your health. And
definitely.
and I love how you've brought that up. I really appreciate that. I think it's really energizing for someone that's out there, maybe plugging away.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sort of helps put things into perspective.
Yeah. I think another thing for me as well, since starting the business, I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of startup companies.
Okay.
So for me to kind of work with them, even the initial kind of stages, it's been really important to kind of grow with them, build their brand, build their story, and to create that relationship kind of moving forward, and to grow it. So that's been really important.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. What can we pick up in the workplace that kind of caters to people's lifestyles and actually incorporate that in design so it's somewhere that people want to come?
It's a very good question. I suppose what I would do in that respect is like, with people's lifestyles, what do they enjoy doing? What's their outlet? What are they working for?
Yeah.
So, people have hobbies, whether it's exercise, whether it's being a musician, cooking, whatever it may be. If you can kind of facilitate those needs in a working environment, in a workspace, I think it'd be really interesting. So for me, I grew up skateboarding when I was younger.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So,
yeah. Really?
I did. Well, I did do skateboard. I was pretty crap at skateboarding because I fell off. So I was much more on rollerblades, but like the street skates.
Okay.
Had the 2 wheels. But yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I was also terrible, but I think from spending my whole sort of teenage years skateboarding, it really kind of influenced what I did. My music choice, the culture around it, I suppose discipline of learning new tricks was quite interesting, although I wasn't very disciplined. But for example, if you took skateboarding as like a kind of a hobby, an interest in somebody, if your journey to the office was going on a skateboard, perhaps not in central London, but it had a facility in the office where you could, I don't know, cruise around, put your skateboard, drop in.
Yeah.
Excuse the pun, but yeah, in so many ways, and that can be quite cool. And not just that, people are doing. I think what's happening now a lot is people are having kind of multifunctional spaces. So we're seeing the likes of yoga and wellness in offices, but actually, slightly contrary to all of this, I think what's really interesting. So when I think about WeWork and what they did and bringing that idea, it's very much like, the beers are on tap. Let's go and have free coffees. Let's go and have all the croissants in the morning. All these kind of like incentives to get people to stay in the office. But for me, and for what I've seen over the last few years, is actually there's a big incentive to sort of push. You design an office space, you design an environment where you want people to go. But what's really important is the businesses surrounding the proximity of the office. So actually, the push should, for me personally, I think the push should be to I don't know, sort of membership out for the local coffee shop, to the local gym, to the local, I don't know, gym box or third space, whatever it may be, and actually to push, the drive into those local businesses and enterprises is perhaps more important sometimes than the actual creating that kind of facility within the office itself.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, you've touched on loads of golden nuggets in 30 seconds. I love what you've just said. And I think, I mean, going back to the skateboarding,
Mm,
like that's as a teenager, that was a lifestyle. It was the time of day that you centered your day around. It was down to the dress and the music and like pushing boundaries either in yourself mentally or against the law or
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
whatever that is. It's kind of it's a culture that you are subscribing to because you enjoy it and you want it. And all those incentives you spoke about, which were great, it's so much deeper than the incentive. It's about the whole atmosphere and culture that it provides and brings and creates, that experience and those that people want, that sort of desire to be fulfilled
yeah.
is what they want. And that's really like it's just catering to our desires as a lifestyle.
Certainly
I
is.
think if we understand our people and the demographic and what those requirements are that you touched on, can build like super strong brands and like
Yeah,
really successful brands.
and actually, what's really important is with businesses and growth and development, it's not a one size fits all. So designing a space, are you going to be designing it for a 21-year-old graduate or a 64-year-old employee who's been at the company for decades, or the business owner, whatever it may be, who's looking at the other end of the spectrum to kind of somewhat, retire, start their pension, whatever it may be. I think actually catering to, you've got the age kind of gap, which is really interesting. But there's also the cultural differences. There's your interest. There's your upbringing. There's your, we live in London. London's the best one of the best melting pots in the world. So we're not just catering for a person who's been brought up here, lived here, their whole life. You know, I think the majority of people in London have relationships or family from all over the world, and I think that's the beauty of living in a city like this, and you can learn from all of those. So I think what's really interesting is the fact that actually, especially in London, it's definitely not a kind of one size fits all approach to designing office spaces. It's hard because you have to kind of like really consider the needs of the individuals going there, and it's if you think about those cultural references, as you said, the skateboarding idea is great, but I'm not going to design a 100-person company with a skate park in it, as much as I would love to, because it's a certain sort of small niche. You could look at an individual who did something completely different, somebody perhaps in, I don't know, the armed forces, for example, or somebody who was a musician or a professional footballer, whatever it may be. I think for them going to a space is really important.
Yeah, and I think when we are as we are in London and office spaces in London, we kind of are here because we like that cultural melting pot, like the amount of people I speak to that are kind of here because of one reason or another, because of how the variety of people and how they bumped across their significant other or something
Yeah,
like that. And so representing that in the workspace is kind of still fulfilling someone's lifestyle desires because they've chosen to like home up in that.
exactly.
We
Yeah,
can still touch all of those like points and
and that can come across in so many ways through through kind of more, perhaps, if you look at the finishes, trying to implement something which is, I don't know, terracotta from Tuscany or whatever it may be, like trying to get those cultural references with the
yes.
finishes. And when you look at like fabrics and wall coverings, and we're in a nice environment doing the podcast now, you can see it all. But it goes further than that. It's what you're playing on the radio when you come into the space, what you're playing on your Sonos or whatever it is. What snacks are they offering as you come in? Those kind of things. Like, oh yeah, I used to have this when I lived in Colombia or I grew up or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And and then again it can go further. What kind of, I think smells are really important sense actually. If you kind of evoke those memories, it's can touch on something which is really nostalgic.
Yeah.
I think giving people nostalgia in a space gives them a level of comfort when they think about their home, for example. So I think there's so many ways visually we can create a space to try and do this kind of nice environment for people to go to. But the small touch points, like, as I said, what snacks they're having, what it smells like, what music is playing, those sort of things can be really important.
Yeah, how does like different textures and materials, surfaces, how do they change people's thoughts and feelings and behaviors?
I think with that, you're looking at kind of, I suppose we're going down that road of what can evoke certain memories of, or associations. So you can look at a fabric, you can look at a curtain, and I love the way that the market's going now, especially in a renaissance in the last few years of some of the carpet brands doing carpet tiles, which like Milliken did one a few years ago. It just literally looked like I was walking to my grand's living room, in such a good way, in such as kind of like almost tongue in cheek way to bring that in and fulfill that kind of those memories and nostalgia is really important. So I think that can evoke kind of your memories, your sense of belonging, your through color choices and materials, and there is very much thinking on a broader scale. If somebody is from a particular country, you look at like Italy or Portugal, where they've got great stone, and you try and bring those stones into the business, or trying to build these worktops or something along those lines. You're like, that's from my hometown or whatever it is. I think things like that are really important. You look, beautiful textured wall finish. There's so many happening. There's so many beautiful kind of products on the market now, and you think actually, if you think about that kind of like whole Persian kind of Middle Eastern feel with the kind of the sand, the beautifully built houses and kind of sort of home dwellings, you can look to bring those surfaces in as well. Look at Morocco or whatever. So I think that's really important for me.
Yeah, no, and it does. You can kind of bring the best of every culture together, and there's no time like now, is there, that we can actually do that?
Definitely.
The world's got smaller in that sense, and like design is allowing us to push those boundaries of mixing different cultures and colours and styles that might have never been mixed before.
Yeah, I think it's I suppose in some way it's quite hard because it's, as you say, it's not a one size fits all, is what we've kind of been discussing. But the idea of evoking a sense of belonging or a sense of comfort within a space is really important to make a employee or a worker feel kind of calm and giving you a desirable environment to go to.
Yeah. You've touched on people feeling calm. I like that. How do you like people to feel in the spaces that you design?
It really varies actually, and I think it's very much down to the client and the brief you're given. So I did a project last year. We designed a big paddle club in Canary Wharf.
What club?
A paddle club. So paddle is like this. Do you know what paddle is?
No.
Okay, so
I pretend I do.
Yeah, sorry. So paddle seems to be taking the world by storm now. It's kind of like somebody gave me a really good analogy the other day. It's like tennis mixed with chess. So the idea is kind of a hard perforated bat, and it's a small court, and you play as pairs, and there's similar rules to tennis. We'll play a game together, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
Okay.
But from my perspective, I didn't know what it was at the beginning of last year, and then I got to design the first sort of premium club in London, and that's in Canary Wharf, and it was a beautiful experience working with my client. We've got a really good relationship. He's a brilliant human being, and the the reason why kind of going down this road is because the idea of what do you want a space to feel like, and within this kind of scheme, the idea is when you enter this paddle club, which is in the Canary Wharf, there's a big tunnel. So the tunnel goes to the building itself is a big 30,000 square feet canopy structure with like changing rooms, a shop, a mezzanine, 7 courts. And actually the arrival experience, we've got this tunnel, and he was like, I want people to have adrenaline when they go into the space. I want people to feel pumped. I want them to feel ready for their game. So I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, well, how do I kind of evoke that kind of feeling, and how do I implement colours and lighting and those kind of materials? And the kind of analogy I was starting to look at was, what does a gladiator look like when they're going into the ring? What does a sports star look like when they go into that, when they go through the tunnel and they're there in a 100,000 person stadium? That kind of adrenaline of like, right, I'm ready to play. And we really played, and we touched upon different surfaces, quite an industrial feel. And when I say industrial, I mean trying to evoke kind of, greys, concrete textures. We had a kind of blue neon lighting. And then what's really cool is when you go into the space, there's a huge void looking up to the ceiling, which is 10 meters high. So you've got that kind of like grandeur. Drama, great word. And then you kind of go through this gully into the arena where all the stadiums are. So I would sit here and say, actually, I really want to create a calm environment in all my spaces, but the answer is definitely different to the projects you work on and the feeling you're trying to achieve.
That's a perfect answer, Matt. I love it. It's not, there isn't a right feeling, because it depends who you're designing for, where you're designing, the people, the purpose of the project, what the objectives are, what the goals are. And I would love to see this pedal space.
Yeah. We'll play a game.
Sounds amazing. Like just the adrenaline and the drama of it. And yeah. So have you got any experiences of where you've done like something completely opposite?
I had a really funny project about 8 years ago. 8-9 years ago, very much the start of my kind of the early stages of my career, and we were designing a barrister's chambers in sort of Chancery Lane, and we had one particular client had a relatively small room like this size.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm talking about this is I think it's quite funny because again, not looking at it doesn't have to be every single big project you do is not the most. There's learnings you can take from every size, value and so on.
Yeah.
And this guy was quite eccentric, dealing with high profile cases. Quite a reputable name within the business. But he said, I want to turn my office in a very small sense of as barrister chambers into a whole climbing frame. So we built all these scaffold shelves, we reinforced everything so he could literally practice doing weights, having chin-up bars, climbing frame. And I liked what was really interesting about that is that there was this somewhat kind of like, in my eyes as a person who perhaps once a month puts the wig on, goes to court, does their job, but wants to kind of bring a playful sense into their and a practical sense for fitness within their kind of working space. I thought that was really interesting. It's the last thing I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, I am so surprised.
Yeah.
And if you had said it happened 6 months ago, I'd be less surprised. But the fact that it happened 8 years ago,
so long
there must
ago.
have been some like real raised eyebrows.
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, I suppose what goes behind closed doors is... Yeah. And the funny thing is, actually, in this particular project, the building was so heavily listed and we struggled to like fix onto the wall, and we had to make sort of some adjustments, and it was an interesting project. Literally had like climbing frame everywhere in this whole office space. Yeah.
I'd love that to be my office.
Yeah.
So Matt, that's great. You've talked about some really like brilliant examples. What's bad design?
Oh, bad design. It's quite a good question, actually. I think bad design probably comes back to like the thinking behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And if people have this idea, if they want to design something to look good, I'd say that's bad design, because ultimately, for me as an individual, I like to implement and design space and create environments which have thought behind it and tells a story. And having worked in companies and now working myself, like the term narrative is so widely used, but really, really important. What's your story? Why are you doing this? The purpose place people, right? But if you're just designing something to look good, then I think that can be as bad design. And I think that there's an element where, especially with the likes of kind of AI now, where people can see something, they take it very literally, and then finding what's implemented is perhaps different. Do you know the whole Wonka story which happened? Have you seen that?
No.
Okay, we'll talk that on another day. But yeah, I think
We've got a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, I think if you can, people can sell the dream too much, and I think the idea of you've got to be, especially with bad design, if you kind of like do that initial kind of a beautiful scheme that looks great, and that's the only reason why you want it to look because you want it to look good. I think that can be bad design, because actually it's all about what's important, what the story is, why are you doing it, why are you making something look good. I think if the desire and ambition is just to be visually good, then I think that's bad design.
I agree with you. I think it's very hollow. And
Yeah.
It's very easy to copy. It's very hollow, and it doesn't breathe the sort of values and the lifestyle and the purpose and all that good stuff we've spoken about.
Yeah.
It's just a shell. It's like someone without a vision, without a motor.
Exactly.
It's losing it. But you've touched on telling a story, and I love that. I think that's really important. I think you can create a space with so much story in it and so much lovely narrative. But how do you actually then convey and tell that story to the guests and the visitors or the staff that are coming in and actually using that space?
So with that question in mind, I did a project a few years ago in Old Street.
Okay.
And it was a converted former recording studio in Old Street. And that was kind of in my tenure at Thirdway. So it was a 5-story building. We worked, the architects at Thirdway at the time kind of built a couple more stories on top. Only built one extra story. And we kind of converted this beautiful Victorian warehouse into a new space for a new home. And a new home was for a pharmaceutical company based in Moorfields. Moorfields Eye Hospital.
Yes.
And I think one thing I would say, especially working in a city where there's a lot of history to buildings, we have a legacy of Victorian architecture, we have, I don't know, Georgian architecture, we have post-war architecture, you have something like St. Paul's, in London, for example, it's beautiful, and in Europe there's so many amazing sort of decorated buildings that have been there for centuries. And one thing I would say is that every building has a story in you. If you can find the story, it's really important. So with this in mind, and this particular project, we were working with this pharma company. They were signing the lease of this building, but what I was really interested about as a designer was, what did this building used to be and what did it used to look like? So I got in touch with the old recording studio owner. We had 2 or 3 meetings together. We'd go for coffees, and he would literally speak for hours and hours and hours on how it used to be a recording studio for some amazing artists in London. They used to hold raves, squat parties, basement fueled rampages, but it was something so like wonderful about it, because it was in those kind of like, it was in the early 2000s when the kind of music was such like an important part of culture then. It still is now, but I think there's a real push there, especially with the likes of kind of Amy Winehouse and Pete Doherty and that kind of ilk, I would say. And so what we actually managed to do was we built a whole. Well, we compiled a book of all old images, all old, sort of like literature of what the space used to be and what it used to look like. And there were photos of what we designed, but in its former life. So, for example, the lower ground floor was like we designed it to be. I designed like a nice kind of social, engaging cafe area, the breakout area for the staff. But the photos I received were this small space, about 300 people having a party. And so I worked with what was really good actually when I worked at Thirdway, where there was a whole kind of like brand integration team. And we actually, we kind of, by giving a bit of a nod to what the building used to be, we looked at the former artists who were connected with the recording studio. I mean, my colleague at the time, he designed a beautiful wall mural telling that story of what it was, with like beautiful kind of like album covers, and yeah, it was really good.
Sounds that's amazing. I love it.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
yeah, it's only around the corner. But like, I
Yeah.
suppose I guess what I'm saying is every building you work in has a story.
Yeah, and you just got to work it.
You've got to work it. You've got to
Yeah.
find out what it was, find out what it, and especially with something that's been around for decades, centuries. There's so many former lives in it. So I'm working in a property now that was a former coach house. Then it was a former garage for years and years and years, and now we're converting it into like a residential dwelling. So these things evolve, these things change. But if you can pick a little note, it's really nice. Just a little hint, whether it's a plaque, whether it's trying to implement a material that was already used, whether it's I think you can really play on that.
Yeah, no, I love that.
Yeah,
Sounds amazing.
yeah,
And it sounds so heartfelt and so meaningful, and yeah, it's so much personality
yeah.
to the design, which kind of you touched on it very quickly earlier, but it's kind of what AI misses out on. What are your thoughts on AI?
It's a good question, actually. I keep saying it's a good question. It is a good question. Look, I'm definitely not the most, as an individual, I'm definitely not the most computer literate person. However, there's some amazing tools it's doing. There's some really positive things that it's doing, especially in regards to streamlining processes. I think it's really important. But to design, I think fundamentally designs has to come from the heart, has to come from the individual, has to come from um, a person, a human. And I think that AI can definitely help in some ways. Um, and it's easy to sit here and think it's terrible and fight against it. But I think in a society, for me personally, I've got to work with it and see ways of utilizing it. But definitely not taking over design.
No,
So
I mean, it's hard to say what it will do, I suppose, because I can imagine the days that Google search launched, people sort of maybe never thought that the yellow pages would die, but then
yeah,
it kind of did.
yeah,
So it's hard to say where it will go, but I just can't, even from like my role and what I'm involved in and the projects I'm involved in from a creative aspect, I can see it might take out some admin,
yeah, yeah.
but there's so much emotion that goes into creativity, whether it's graphic design, like you mentioned earlier, photography, copywriting, interior design,
Yeah,
music. You can't just get AI just to make it. I mean, you can get AI to make up a song, but like, where's the story?
yeah. I think what's really interesting is that it's definitely you kind of hit the nail on the head of like that kind of emotion needs to come through an individual, and you're right. AI is it's only going to get better. It's
Yeah.
what they can do now. In 10 years' time, it's going to become cheaper. It's going to become quicker. It's going to become a lot more accessible, and I suppose it's going to become a lot more kind of standardized in modern day life, and whether it's programs we use or processes we have. But fundamentally, we work in an industry. Again, we're very lucky to where we create physical environments.
Yeah.
So something that's technology based can't, AI. Well, I don't know if in my lifetime there'll be robots on site, but I might be surprised.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. It could happen so fast because the
yeah.
iPhone happened fast, didn't it?
iPhone happened fast. Yeah,
So yeah, I was actually talking about this the other day at home. I was like, said to my wife, "What would you like? Would you like a robot?" And she was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Literally, like, just go and pick up your things, tidy up."
did you? Okay,
Yeah, and she was like, "Well, that would never happen." I was like, "Well, it's totally possible.
totally possible.
Totally
Yeah,
possible." And I do think that one day in the future, like homes come with Wi-Fi, they will come with a robot.
yeah,
Like I can totally see that.
yeah.
Be quite useful.
I watched a video of a robot snowboarding the other day, and he was,
Was it good?
yeah, it's better than me. I mean, that's probably not very hard, but yeah, it was crazy. So
But what's the point?
God knows, building an army maybe.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
help. That's a bit
yeah,
scary.
yeah. It's gonna look good though, from us designers, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's crazy. Matt, I guess another sort of one other question that pops to mind that you've dealt with across so much, and I love all the experience and I love all the case studies you've brought as well. I think it's been like real gold dust for the listeners. But when you are dealing with a project, you've got like a range of people that you're talking to at client side. What are the most important people to get involved on the project?
Um. Well, there's a few things. There's decision makers,
Hmm.
and are those decision makers the CEOs? Are they the office managers? Are they the facilities team? Are they the client for a startup? Um, they're really important to get on your side.
Hmm.
Now, it's really down to the company itself or who you're dealing with as to how many people they bring on board. But I've worked with a range from an individual to a large sort of committee steer group.
And how
Um,
large is large?
Probably like I'd say 15 to
Okay.
20.
So it is
Yeah,
big.
yeah, big, yeah. And people aren't going to agree on everything.
No, probably not very
Um,
much.
Sorry,
Probably not very
probably
much.
not very much. Yeah, I've actually been in environments where I've actually introduced people who've never met each other before in the same business
Oh
to
well.
take aboard a design. So that's always quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
You're like the conduit between the people. But in terms of the most important people, um, it's really who they enlist their trust with. So sometimes, as I said, the founder of a business might want to have complete creative control, or they want to be able to sort of delegate a responsibility with somebody else, whether it's a colleague or an employee or I don't know their partner or whatever it may be. They're kind of the most. I think fundamentally the decision makers are the most important people, and then perhaps I suppose there's an element where you have to make sure that the whole business you're dealing with is happy.
Hmm.
So, when they release that initial comms of like, this is the process, this is the project, this is how it's going to look like, that's really important as well, because how will those people react? Who are those people who are looking at it who are perhaps somewhat in the dark beforehand?
Hmm.
So I think they're probably quite interesting. They're probably, for me, they are also really important sort of key people in the process of design, definitely,
Oh, that's nice.
and decision making, and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. And you've kind of, especially now with Orca, you're kind of almost selling the vision and the brand and doing the design and
Yeah,
then I've sort of saying
yeah,
the delivery. You're kind of everything sits with you.
definitely.
So
Yeah,
building those relationships is a really key part of that.
absolutely. And I think that, one thing I've learned being a small kind of boutique studio is how reactive I can be,
Hmm.
or how I try to be anyway.
Hmm.
And that's definitely a sort of strong selling point. Being reactive, being available,
Hmm.
being able to answer and to make quick decisions, and
Hmm.
you know, being able to drive that and push that how I want to be able to grow the business is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And being personable and being approachable and so many factors. I think fundamentally I'm trying to I'm just trying to build the business as if I would want to work with somebody within the business. So
Yes.
that's, I'm just trying to give that image across and that offering. Yeah.
You're trying to be the person that you would look for.
100%. Yeah, you said it much better than I did.
No,
Yeah.
no, I like it.
Yeah.
I love it. I suppose all through your career and now being on your own, like how do you actually get your inspiration for projects or ideas?
So I think for me, inspiration can come in so many forms. And don't get me wrong, there is the times where I'm on Pinterest trying to get images and stuff and trying to build a bit of whether it's a document but I really try and not do that if I can. And actually the importance, and I try and teach people this, and I try and kind of portray this sort of thinking, is that inspiration can come from so many ways, so many areas. Come from what music you listen to, what you did at the weekend, what you had for dinner last night, what the most recent gym you went to, or the book you're reading, the film you watched. There's so many kind of like avenues that inspiration can come from. And I think it is dangerous just to look at other projects to seek inspiration from, to go on Pinterest to be like, oh, that looks good, let's put that in my project. So I think if I can, I really try and steer away from that. So yeah, as I said, kind of music is so evocative. Sorry, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Music can be so
that
emotionally driven.
Yeah.
Can we cut that bit out? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
It's very cool. So like,
cutting that bit out.
yeah. So like, for example, like music can be so emotionally driven. It can be a piece of art you saw. It can be a book you read. It can be a wonderful film you watched. And I had a conversation with a friend a few months ago, and we were having a really interesting chat. And have you ever been to a gig, right? Have you ever listened to an album that you listen to all the time 20 years ago? Or 15 years ago?
Have I ever listened to an album now that I listened to 15 years ago?
Yeah, like all the time.
Yeah.
So when you listen to an album, do you pretty much know the lyrics word for word?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I listen to loads of new music. I don't have a clue what the musicians, the artist is saying. So I was speaking to my friend about this, and we were discussing about those sort of teenage, perhaps formative years, your associations with that music, and that kind of what you were doing at the time, whether it was that film you watched, a book you read, because it's because there's such kind of milestone years of growing up as a person, it just becomes like imprinted into your brain. So you have that kind of, it's almost like muscle memory. So you remember what it is. You remember every like lyric word for word, which is bizarre because I'm terrible at remembering lyrics. And I think that's really important when I think about kind of inspiration, because that's kind of really pinning on that kind of nostalgic element of what did I remember something, what did I remember then? How has it influenced me now? And I think spaces are key as well. So I definitely visited spaces that, environments when I was younger that I've constantly thought about, that haven't, that I've, can we cut that bit? Is that okay? Yeah. I've visited spaces before. I visited like environments in the past where I haven't been there for 15 or 20 years, but they kind of like imprinted in my brain because of those kind of formative teenage years, I suppose.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important, if like having something that resonates with you well, with what you remember, and touching upon those kind of
nostalgic memories.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Who are some of your favorite artists, whether it's music or not?
Oh, okay. So in terms of design, if we would discuss design studios,
yeah.
I think that I think you had them on the first podcast. I think Jolie doing some fantastic work.
Yeah,
really, really think they're great. These beautiful projects. And actually, in terms of, I'm just having a bit of a mind blank. I don't know. a musician actually I'd say is really good is Max Cooper. I don't know if you know them. They're like an electronic music, and what's really important, well, what I really like about them is they do a whole kind of audio visual show when they perform. So it's
Okay.
not just about the music; it's about the visual aspects and about the environment they create
The whole atmosphere
and the whole
experience.
atmosphere
Yeah.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're kind of some of my big inspiration at the moment.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Also, I have my guilty pleasure is 90s hip hop as well. So that's kind of my thing. That's my vibe. Yeah,
I definitely think everyone has like a wind back clock
yeah,
favorite music, don't they? I think
definitely.
even here, like the in the showroom, we do like events, stuff like that, evening events and candle crafting and do loads of fun things, which is cool. But anyway, it's generally the demographic that comes through is quite young,
Mm,
um, which is fine, which is cool. And the music that we play, it's just so like we quite often have stuff going that's like a rollback, like 90s hip hop, and people love it. It's really funny, like what music does to people and their experience and their feelings.
definitely.
It's
Yeah,
like uh, touching back to Jolie, who you mentioned, obviously spoke to Sarah there, and they have a really interesting um theory. I don't know what the word is. That I've totally picked up. It's about the invisible aesthetic. And they talk about the invisible aesthetic on their website. And it's really, I think it's something that we can all learn from. I mean, I love how they've brought it out, and but I find it so inspiring about like the sound and the light and everything that we might not be able to see or touch, but we can feel.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice, isn't it?
yeah. Really nice and so important, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we spoke about design, houses, music, where you get your inspiration from. Is there anything from books, literature that
Oh yeah.
sparks your
Okay.
creative side?
So I read a really good. I was recommended a really good book I read a couple of years ago. It's called The Power of Moments.
Okay.
And as a designer, I think we create spaces and environments, but there are so many moments within those that create memories and create affiliations with spaces. And in this book, it's a brilliant story. It's a hotel in LA. And it's called the Magic Castle Hotel. Now the hotel itself is a run down. There's painting off the walls. It's all kind of rough around the edges. But when you're sitting by the pool, the kids can literally ring. There's a phone by the swimming pool. They can go up to the phone, call a number, and a butler in completely like a proper tux, really smart, comes over to them with like a huge sort of silver tray with an ice pop on it. Gives them an ice pop. And for a child to have that kind of memory of that place and affiliation is really nice. It's really clever because actually the hotel itself is surrounded by like Hiltons and Novas, or the decent hotels around. But because for that small reason, like that little kind of like nugget of a memory or a moment, it's really popular. And I like that about design, about how you can create moments. And as you say, it's not just about the senses; it's about kind of memory and action that happens within that space. I think it's really cool.
Matt, thank you so much. I've said it throughout, but you've shared in such a lovely way. You've shared so many golden nuggets. And it's been really enlightening. I loved your insights. I love the projects you've spoken about. What, if I can ask one last question? We're very excited about ORCA, seeing you flourish and grow, and we're really following the brand and the story and what's happening. So what is next? What can we expect next in the 3 to 5 years for ORCA? What do you want it to become?
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really good over the last couple of hours. For me as Orca, I'd like to grow sustainably the business. So I'd like to be able to sit here in 3 years' time and have perhaps 8 to 10 employees. The kind of main drive for the business is I love working on beautiful projects and working with fantastic clients and people. But the business itself, I really want to be able to create an environment where I can nurture the people I employ, teach them to be entrepreneurial, teach them to think differently, teach them to kind of, create their own story. I think that's really important for me. Don't get me wrong, there's some amazing design agencies in the world, but sitting here and saying I want to be the best interior designer in the world, that's probably not the forefront of my ambition. I want to be able to create a lovely environment, people to work in, people to be part of a nice business which I'm creating, and kind of nurture that. Help people and make it fun. I think really important to make it fun, have a good time.
I love that. That is such a strong and powerful vision, and if only more people had a vision like that, Matt, I think the world would be a lot better place. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
To them. Thank you very much for listening. I'm also very grateful to all our guests. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave us a rating and a follow. Or if you know who else would like to join the podcast, share the names. We're always open to hearing. Until next time, keep happy, keep healthy, and take care.